All right, everyone. Years ago, when Nigel Farage came out and said, hey, a lot of people who are in positions of power or within academia and stuff, they want to turn the European Union into just Europe and make a superstate. They also want to have a pan-European military force. When he said that 3 or 4 years ago, campaigning for Brexit, everyone acted like he was nuts. And they said, well, that's not actually on anyone's minds. You're a kook. The European Union will continue to function as it does. It's a collective of states that have somewhat free movement between them, a joint currency and so forth. That's what they said. They came out and over they would browbeat him and his fans and other people, Eurosceptics within Europe, as well as elsewhere, and say they were crazy if they suggested that it was ever in the works that these two things could ever occur. Now you see, though, 72 hours ago, you had Macron, who now is openly lambasting the principle of nationalism, which, by the way, to a globalist like him means the nation state altogether. Not talking about, jackboot thugs with World War II era uniforms on. No, not talking about just that portion of nationalism. National socialism, hilariously enough. Talking about the very concept of the nation state is now held in contempt by many of these people because they don't want to continue reigning over their nations. They want to pull together and make one Europe. They want to form a superstate. Now you have a bunch of fake intellectuals who pretend to be quite highbrow but actually are total morons. They don't understand history, apparently, to any significant degree, and they think probably, by and large, that they're operating for benevolent purposes. The worst thing is that the road to hell is paved with good intentions, and often people who actually have really good motivations proclaim these weird ideas. They've been propagandized to and convinced to become sort of pawns in the schemes of the corrupt. So the corrupt build an idea, give it a family-friendly label, and then it's promulgated by academia. Eugenics was promulgated by academia. Here in the United States, the sterilization campaigns were entirely run by universities. They thought they were cleansing the race, doing wonderful things. Yeah, and they were the mainstream academics of the day. Their ideas were totally, their proponents were the establishment of their day. Now you see that the opposite, so-called, is true. Now they're trying to do the opposite and homogenize things and form superstates. But I'm telling you this. The concept is that they want one Europe, a federation, basically, that states will not be able to leave because they're worried. They're worried about other nations leaving the European experiment. They want to conglomerate it further, if not create an outright single state that's simply Europe. They want it to be an empire, and they need a military to do that. It'll be a military that is not accountable to the people of Europe. Intrinsically, it can't be, because those nation states that have in some cases stood for centuries or 1,000 years will be entirely erased. Now, I'm sure that the UK, the people there are very happy that they decided to trigger a Brexit, even though it looks like they're not ever actually going to have one. They're just going to continue on as a vassal in this weird gray area between sovereignty and part of this other experiment, while being so dystopian even in the sovereign sense that it really doesn't matter. The UK's government arguably is worse than Brussels. That's how shitty it is over there. I'm surprised that people haven't put on major protests. Like, your soccer team loses. Your football team loses. You protest and burn cars and throw rocks at the police. Somebody's trying to come along and literally enslave every man and woman and child in your country. Yeah, maybe I'll hold a sign up. First, let me finish this pint, and then I've got to wait till I'm off work. So, join you later. It's incredible, actually. It doesn't make any sense at all. So yeah, they want to form a European empire, essentially. And these fake intellectuals here, they think that they're so highbrow, but they've been fooled. It's like the old adage that the easiest person to rob is a thief, because the thief never thinks they're going to be robbed. The easiest people to fool with propaganda are intellectuals. Because if you've made it sound really good, they will get very, very self-righteous in their pompous arrogance, really. Their egotism, because they've got a PhD from this place and a pair of master's degrees and this high honor from the Educational Institute of Bullshit. Because of all that, they sit in their ivory towers and they grow a big head. And their head is big. They're very intelligent people. But it's sort of like asking a neurosurgeon to develop public policy. Or asking somebody who's versed in nuclear physics to delve into world political history or the history of imperialism in Europe from the 1700s. It's not their forte. And then they have like artists. Okay, artists. So somebody is capable of holding a paintbrush and smearing a piece of fabric. And so their canvas, it brings to light all of the things in their imagination, usually in a postmodern framework. If they're considered esteemed at all, it's probably spit on a canvas, or they put the paint in their asshole and spray it from a ladder. Yeah, those are the people that you want designing your future public policy. I'm telling you this. The sort of federation framework of the European Union as it transits to an empire is looking a lot like the situation. It's an auspicious day because it happens to mark the anniversary of the end of World War I. Doesn't it look a little bit like the sort of federations that were going on and all the treaties and obligations and agreements and trade deals that were struck by Europe to begin with so long ago? Don't you think that that's a little bit of a warning sign that possibly you're one assassination or one bit of intrigue, one scandal away from a continent-rocking war? I think I'd be worried. Macron comes out and he's like, well, Europe needs an army to defend against the Russians and China and the United States. Europe is the fourth wheel. You do not have the capability to do that. You are defended by the United States. And that's worked out very well for you. The reason why Macron and the other globalists over there don't want to continue that arrangement is because they'll have to pay a little bit more. Because Trump is leaning on them to pay a higher margin of the costs of the NATO alliance. Oh, so it's again all about money. And it's also an excuse. They are using Trump as a scapegoat the same way the legacy media does over here for when it lies. See, what happens is the media over here, the corporate media, the multinational parent firms with their so-called national firms that are worth $1 billion apiece, they've lied to people for their entire existence. They tend to be jingoistic, and they're constantly excusing war and scandals. They're constantly covering for corrupt jackasses within the corporate media complex. They're constantly doing hateful and evil and insane things. Trump comes along, mentions that this is happening, and they go ballistic and start propagandizing to people as though that's an attack on the First Amendment. Likewise, the European Union's globalists are using Trump and his generally negative reception in Europe, certainly. They're using that as a scapegoat to push their imperialism. Make no mistake, if you look at what they're actually suggesting, it is simply the formation of an empire without a war. That's all it is, and it's impossible for that to remain stable without brutality. I can guarantee you that when their European army is inevitably formed, in what form it finally takes, it'll be deployed, and what they'll do is very simple. Oh, there are protests in Germany. We're going to send Swedish troops in. There are protests in Spain. We'll send Hungarian troops in. Oh, there are protests in the Netherlands. We're going to send Irish troops in. That's what they'll do. The whole thing is to remove the national focus from the internal international policy. It's very, very simple. You wouldn't, like when you have a riot in France, the French police go in to break it up. They're going to handle it with kid gloves more likely than not because they're their fellow Frenchmen. They're like, hey, ultimately I have to go, fucking back to my neighborhood when I take off the uniform at the end of the day. Some of these people could be from my fucking block. So they keep that in mind. There's a national patriotic sentiment as well. Of, maybe I don't want to crack too many skulls and spill too much of my own brethren's blood here. But if you send people to a foreign theater, you can dehumanize them. This is done in war all of the time. Essentially, you will wage war on the European population by selectively using forces that are not from that area. And that you watch, when they do this, they'll give it a family-friendly label. They'll say, whoa, 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 we have to do this. Because those evil nationalists that might be in the military ranks, they will excuse the criminality of these horrible, despicable protesters, which they will probably label seditious. They'll label them traitors to Europe. They'll call them Russian agents or U.S. agents or something. And they'll say, well, we've got to crack some skulls. But we can't do that if we're sending troops from the same region in. We have to occupy, they will occupy Europe internally. And you will be under martial law, but you won't notice it. And you'll be under hefty surveillance, but you won't notice it. And people from outside will try to warn you that this is a problem, and they will be censored within Europe, and you'll never hear us. That's exactly what will end up happening. You will slip into tyranny. It'll be like a new Dark Ages. And then you'll wake up one day when your daughter ends up beaten to death by the Gestapo. You'll wake up one day and wonder, hey, shit, I don't feel safe after all. Maybe being normal nation states wasn't such a bad idea, but by then it'll be too late and you're all going to die. It'd probably lead to World War III. Yes, Europe is the seat of war in this world. I'm very glad I'm in the Americas. I don't consider myself European. No, I'm an American. I'm all fine and dandy over here. I've got free speech and shit. You can be prevented from even talking about a news story without risking getting your door smashed in. You get fined for having the wrong opinions. You get thrown into prison for having the wrong political affiliation. You get surveillance conducted on you if you're an AfD member. You're one of those 10 million Germans that join them. They're actively undergoing surveillance online 24/7. All in the name of preventing a fascism that the globalists themselves in the European Union are actually promulgating. What else am I supposed to call it? What else do you call it but a form of imperialism, of tyranny? Well, Europeans are used to tyranny, I suppose. There never really was a lot of liberty promulgated in that dark continent, so I suppose I shouldn't be that surprised. The problem is, in this internationalized world, of course, it affects people in other countries as well. Especially if Germany does what it really wants to do, becomes the military masters of this final arrangement, and develops their own nuclear program. Who's going to stop them? They'll be protected by French nuclear power. Who's going to stop them? We're not going to get involved. The UK won't get involved. Are we going to have to liberate Europe? This time under the threat of atomic annihilation? Is that really necessary? Do we really want to end the world because a bunch of idiots over in Europe want to embezzle their people's money? Because that's exactly what they're trying to do. They're trying to turn you into slugs and simple-minded thought slaves. That's exactly what the European Union has always been about. That's about all. Peace out.